are there. Okay. During the first week of June 1934, Baba was preparing to depart on his 7th journey to Europe. Baba made all the required arrangements for the men and women Mandali during his absence by giving individual instructions to each one. Driven in the Pontiac by Adi Sr., Baba left Maribag for Nasik at 4:30 in the afternoon of 6 June. Also accompanying him were Kalingad and Jalbai. They stopped along the way so Baba could bid farewell to the Sata family at Akbar Press. At Khushru quarters, Baba also met Khan Sahib, who wept and begged Baba to help him out of debt. Baba promised out of proceeds, to help him out of debt. Baba promised out of proceeds from his film project. If it was successful, they reached Nasik about 8:30 that night. Baba spent the entire next day with Baal Sahib, Syed Sahib, Nawal, Ramju, and Rustam's families, and a few other close devotees in Nasik. In the evening, Baba attended and enjoyed very much a special exhibit of the poetry of Chandidas put on in his honor. Baba departed by an early morning train for Bombay on the 8th with Adi Sr., Jalbai, and Ramju. His visit to Nasik was meant to be kept secret, but as usually happened, somehow people found out about his presence and tried to see him for darshan. In Bombay, they stopped first at Neelu's, where the Mandali stayed.
Sorry, but there is two more lines before it.
Okay, mine is blocked on my screen. Okay, I see. Thank you. Since Baba was preoccupied with giving last-minute instructions to his close lovers, most who sought him out were turned away. In Bombay, they stopped first at Neelu's, where the Mandali stayed, while Baba went on to the confectioners. Two persons who met him in Bombay were the actor Vinayak Karnataki, 28, and his friend Bal Babu Davale, who, after much persistence, were allowed the master's darshan the next day at Neelu's. Vinayak suggested that Baba's film be made in India with a Western director and actors. And there's a footnote. Can we do footnotes?
Yes. You see that, or should I read it?
Okay. The actor's given name was Vinayak Ambar Baikar, but he was known as Master Vinayak. He appeared in more than 30 Hindi films and directed many of them. Bal Davale was also an actor and later became a cinematographer. In 1954, he was hired to film, quotes, 3 incredible weeks, end quotes, gathering. Baba, Chanji, Kaka, and Adi Jr. sailed from Bombay for Marseille aboard the SS Mongolia at 1:30 on the afternoon of Saturday, 9 June 1934. With tremendous effort, Sarosh managed to obtain a loan of 1,000 rupees and handed it over to Baba to help pay for his trip. just a few minutes before the ship sailed. Footnote. Meher, do you want to read the footnotes?
Yeah. Baba had told Sarosh he too could accompany them, but Sarosh's father, who was vehemently opposed to Baba, did not permit him. Adi Senior and Rustum were told that Baba would send them to America after he returned from Europe.
About 30 lovers from Bombay came to Mole station to give Baba a hearty send-off. They profusely garlanded Baba before he boarded the ship. Those who arrived late threw garlands up to Chanchi on deck, and he garlanded Baba on their behalf. It was a scorchingly hot day, and Baba gestured for his lovers to leave and not linger in the sun. But out of devotion, the crowd persisted despite the heat, standing and waving up to the last, I need more words, last moments of departure. Baba motioned again for them to go home, but they stood at the dock until the last blast of the ship's whistle was heard in the distance. The Mongolia was an old and small-sized ocean vessel. And on this voyage, Baba and the Mandali experienced some inconveniences. Baba typically wanted his meals in his cabin, and the purser finally agreed, in spite of the fact that it was against the rules. The weather continued to be hot as the ship traveled across the Arabian and Red Seas, and it reeled and pitched, but Baba remained unaffected by these rough conditions. 13 days later, on 22nd June, they reached Marseille, where Ruano and Rano were awaiting their arrival. Baba had previously intimated that only Ruano should be at the dock to meet them, and Rano was afraid of what Baba might say when he saw her. Before disembarking, Baba called them into his cabin and warmly embraced them. Rano whispered in his ear that she was not supposed to be there. Baba reassured her by replying, quotes, "I am pleased with you, so don't worry." After spending the day in Marseille, Baba and the Mandali took the train to Paris, joined by Ruano, Rano, and Norina. During the night's journey, Rano felt hungry, but the food was kept in a tin container on the rack in Baba's compartment. Still new to Baba, Rano did not know that she should not disturb the master while he rested. When she entered his compartment, Baba had his eyes closed and looked as though he were sound asleep. As Rano quietly took down the tin, Baba opened his eyes and motioned to her, asking her what she was doing. Rano replied that she was hungry. Baba gestured, "All right, take something to eat and then go rest." Rano had been careful not to make the slightest noise when reaching for the food, and was surprised that Baba was suddenly so awake. After a while, Baba sent Kaka with 2 black velvet pillows, one each for Rano and Ruano, along with instructions for them to go to sleep on these pillows. They both were to keep the pillows and never part with them. Baba arrived in Paris on Saturday, 23rd June 1934, and stayed at the Metropolitan Hotel. Rano's mother, Nani, joined the group there. She had arrived earlier and had been awaiting Baba's arrival. Soon after going to Ruano's apartment, Baba met with Karl Wallmuller, 56, the German writer, poet, and artist who was working on the film project. There's footnote.
Karl Wollmeyer later saw Baba twice in London. That's the end of footnote.
Okay. Wallmuller had completed the script and presented it to Baba. Baba discoursed to him for 3 hours about creation, transmigration, reincarnation, the spiritual planes, and God realization, and showed him the chart which he had brought. Wallmuller was impressed, and Baba instructed him to write a new story based on the explanations and chart he had given. For 2 days, Baba saw people in Paris. He met many of Ruano's friends and associates, including the Duke of Richelieu, 58, who had come to know of Baba through Narina, and who was a great admirer of Swami Vivekananda, whom he had met in Paris. Footnote.
The Duke's full name was Mary Odette Jean Arnaud de Chapelle de Jumilhac.
Okay. On the 24th, a 60-year-old man came to see Baba and said, quote, although I have had many minor turning points in my life, I feel today that the main turning point of my life has at last arrived by meeting you. Baba smiled and explained to him, yes, that turning point has to arrive in each one's life. It is like a war. Every day, every hour, every minute of a man's life is a sort of minor war between the heart and mind, emotion and intellect, good and bad. And when these individual conflicts spread out and develop, the collective result eventually takes the shape of a big worldwide war, which can never be avoided by any number of peace conferences, unless and until the very root cause is removed. I turned the reading over. I needed to hear that. Who wants to read next? Elizabeth, did you want to read?
Okay. It's interesting. I had an intervening phone call with somebody just about this subject. Interesting. Departing Paris for London on Tuesday, 26 June, Baba instructed Rano, Nani, and Ruano to remain behind. Traveling by train, Baba and the Manjali reached London that same day via Calais and Dover. All of the master's English disciples showed up at Victoria Station to welcome him. Baba stayed at Delia's brother Herbert's apartment at 61 Campaign Gardens, West Hampstead. Elizabeth, Norina, Kitty, Margaret, and Mabel stayed with Baba. Chanji, Kaka, Adi Jr., and Quinton were accommodated in Margaret Crask's apartment, although they were with Baba most of the time. Chanji and Adi Jr. stayed nearby Baba during the day, and Kaka was with him at night. Again, there were many discussions about the actual making of a film, and the Lord of the Universal Cinema showed a keen interest in it. A corporation named Circle Productions, Inc. was formed on 28th June in order to raise money by selling shares to finance the film. It was believed that half the amount could be raised by selling stock, and the balance could be supplied by a film studio or distributor. Baba was made president of the corporation, and Narina Elizabeth, Elsie Domville, and the producer, Gabrielle Pascal, were vice presidents. Meanwhile, attempts at raising money for the film projects were also being pursued in India at this time. Of the total estimated cost of 1 million rupees, 500,000 were to come from the West and the other 500,000 from India. Prior to Baba's journey to the West, Chanji had been ordered in February to contact Akbar Haidari for help in raising the money from wealthy Indians, but Haidari had been unsuccessful. William Donkin again came to see Baba, and Baba instructed him to concentrate on his medical studies. He was with Baba most of the time and became closer to the master during his 6-day stay. Charles Purdom met with Baba on the 28th to discuss his work of writing a book about Baba's life, which he had already begun. Tom Sharpley saw Baba the same day. Tom was a quiet, unassuming person with a deep connection. He was the type of invisible person you did not know was around, even though he was there the whole time, Margaret recounted. When Baba was in London, the Countess Kitty Palin, when Baba was in London, the Countess Kitty Palin hosted a reception for him at her home on Friday evening, 29th June, 1934. About 15 sincere people came to meet Baba, and he answered their many questions and gave explanations. One man asked, "How can I be a true Christian?" From the alphabet board, Baba replied, "By following the teachings of Christ and by living the life that he lived and wanted you to live." People speak of Christianity but are not prepared to follow Christ's words, to present the other cheek when slapped, saying it is impractical, and flying at one another's throat at the slightest provocation. They create hatred where Jesus wanted them to create an atmosphere of love and brotherhood everywhere. What wonder is it that the whole world is in a muddle about everything? Mrs. H. Ford then asks, "But if you are the Christ, why don't people know about it?" Baba answered, "It is because people cannot know that I have to take this human form. Jesus was not known in his time, even by his own intimate, immediate companions. Judas, who was near him all the time and even kissed him, could not understand him. So do you all not understand me externally in my physical form? Because as the real infinite Christ, I am within you, as I am in everybody." So that must be a mistake. So do you all not understand me externally in my physical form? Because as the real infinite Christ, I am within you as I am in everybody. Someone asked why Jesus never married. Baba gave a detailed explanation, which had been dictated the year before. The avatar's exterior way of living is regulated by the habits and customs of the times, and he adopts that attitude which is most suited to serve as an example to his contemporaries. But in essence, all avatars embody the same ideal of life. At the time of Zoroaster, humanity was hesitant and lacked equilibrium. The Persians then were neither complete materialists nor really attracted toward the spiritual light. He taught them to be good householders, to marry and abstain from desiring the wife of another, and to worship God. His own life was based on this principle: good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Zoroaster was never married. At the time of Krishna, the Hindus were at war, fighting among themselves.
Elizabeth,
What?
Zoroaster was married. You said.
Oh my goodness,
that-
sorry. Zoroaster was married. Yeah, I don't know why I read it the other way. Okay, Zoroaster was married. At the time of Krishna, the Hindus were at war, fighting among themselves. Envy and greed were predominant, and a real concept of spiritual life and love was unknown to them. Krishna based his spiritual teachings on the laws of love and pure, innocent merriment. Human beings were joyfully directed toward a disinterested ideal of love. At the time of Buddha, the people of India were deep into materialism in order to demonstrate that their conception of value was wrong and that they were victims of the goddess of illusion, or Maya. Buddha renounced his wife, his family, and the riches of the world in order to establish his teachings in renunciation. At the time of Muhammad, the Arab tribesmen were very sensuous, and it was not considered bad or illegal to live with several wives. If Muhammad had not married like Jesus and had advocated celibacy, or if he had imposed absolute continence, it would have produced inevitably dangerous reactions. Few people would have followed his teachings, and fewer still would have been attracted to such an ideal. Muhammad had 6 wives, but he had no physical contact with them. At the time of Jesus, arrogance, imperiousness, pride, and cruelty were the characteristics of people. Nevertheless, they possessed a conception of justice in regard to women and marriage. Therefore, it was not necessary, as it was in Arabia, to make marriage an example. Jesus lived the life of humility, simplicity, and poverty, and he endured suffering in order to direct human beings toward the purest ideal, beloved God. The avatars incarnate in this world at different times, and their teachings have therefore to be adopted to the mentality of their epoch. At times, the avatar bases his teaching on the search for the personal God, and at other times on the search for the impersonal God. It may be compared to a hospital where the sick complain of thirst at different times. The doctor will prescribe tea or coffee in the morning to those who complain in the morning, water or fruit juice in the afternoon, buttermilk in the evening, and hot milk before sleep. The doctor is the same, and the complaint is the same, but the thirst is quenched in different ways according to the different conditions of different times. God, manifesting as the avatar in different periods of time, quenches the thirst of man in different ways. All human beings, either consciously or unconsciously, have the same thirst for truth. Baba continued, explaining about his own working. There are 3 principal ways in which I work: individually, collectively with crowds for the masses, and universally. When I work individually, it is with persons who are with me, or persons who are away from me, or persons who are connected with me. In some cases, I work through their material downfall, and some through their material welfare. In some cases, I deliberately bring about material downfall because I always have their spiritual upliftment at heart in the background. In some cases, I use them as mediums to efface their own meiotic qualities for their own salvation, and that's where I am misunderstood. But I don't mind it. I know why I do it. That is sufficient, because when to the extreme, love and hatred both have the same results. That's interesting. For example, a loves me extremely. Oh, A loves me extremely, meaning he thinks of nothing but me all the while and is lost in me. So also B is extremely against me, that is, hates me but always thinks of me and is lost in me, though with antagonistic feelings. I always use the medium of thought. It depends upon the qualities that readily respond to the push. When I work collectively, which is generally at plays, movies, and sporting events, wherever people collect and concentrate on a particular object, it is easy for me to have my spiritual effect collectively on their minds. When I work universally, it is through agents. My mind, being universal, is linked with every individual mind, even with advanced minds who are my agents. And so I am present and working through my agents in every part of the world. That is why at times when speaking to one person, my mind is working elsewhere. People have seen and marked me stopping suddenly in the midst of conversation, as if absent and away from the spot, engrossed in something else. At night, I make some of my disciples sit beside me and press the sides of my feet to have their physical touch. Kaka, while I night watch, sometimes abruptly sits up in bed at night, having seen some signs or a flash of light which makes him nervous. This at the time of my special work with bodiless spirits. There are scores of such spirits, but in whatever stage of advancement, they have to take human form again, because the ultimate goal of every soul is to be one with the infinite. This is, in short, how I work. Only those in the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh planes, and who are conscious of me, know under and for whom they are physically working. They cannot see me physically, but their subtle and mental bodies see my subtle body, which is similar to the gross. They also know that I am one with the infinite. Giving an example, Baba said, while I'm sitting here, my agents are working in India, Persia, Africa, and so on. This very moment, they see my subtle body all at the same time in different places, because the messages they send are sent through the mental plane, which the mental plane where there is only the will to do a thing. Instantaneously, it reaches the desired spot. Then people started asking questions again. How do they become agents? Mostly due to past connection with me. Those connected with me in past lives become agents. Those deeply connected with me become members of the circle, but all is infinite one. What do you mean by your circle? Baba answered, the circle is of my deeply connected disciples who are unconsciously one with me now and will consciously be one with me in the future when I have completed the work which I can do during the period of their apparent ignorance. It is like having a veil between us. They are one with me, but being behind the veil, do not see. Where love, lover, and the beloved are one, there the work of duality ends. So for the sake of the work, this duality and ignorance exist. The agents do the work for people on the gross plane, and through the circle, I work for the spiritual plane without their, meaning members of the circle, being aware of it. Jesus worked through his apostles on the spiritual plane without their knowing it, but later on, they knew it. They knew all the time it was Jesus working, and they were his instruments, mediums, and all the time one with Jesus. Another person inquired, are science and religion separate? Baba replied, it depends upon how it is understood and utilized. If science deals only with material advancement, it would be said to have nothing to do with spirituality. But when it is expressed to make the meaning of life clear, then it is also a branch of spirituality. Just as art is spiritual if expressed rightly. If it is expressed wrongly, it is material. One person asked, will the West ever produce an avatar? Baba revealed, the avatar has always been and will always be born in Asia. This is because of the peculiar situation there in the evolution of the universe and in the existence of the gross plane, which necessitates the manifestation of the avatar only on that particular continent. Wow. Will the avatar ever be a woman? The person queried. Never, Baba emphasized. Never has there been a female avatar, nor will there ever be one. The avatar has always been a male and will always be in a male form. The following day, Saturday, 30th June, 1934, Krishna Veer, proprietor of the Kohinoor Indian restaurant, invited Baba to a reception there, and Baba went with about 30 people. After the luncheon, Baba expressed his desire to go to the East End, a poor section of the city, to see Bill and Neville Precy's mother, Jessie, who had surgery the day before. Mrs. H. Ford, a wealthy woman who had met Baba the previous evening, offered to drive him there in her Rolls Royce, and Baba accepted. The lanes in the neighborhood of the East End were narrow, and the large car could not enter. The car was parked, and Baba walked to the house at 16 Lockyer Street, Long Lane. The Percy family were surprised at Baba's unexpected visit, especially the mother. With tears in her eyes, the bedridden woman uttered in a barely audible voice, "It is awfully kind of you to have come all this way." Baba's presence and loving touch comforted the woman. He spelled out to her, "I love to be among such good souls, however poor. Poverty is no sin. Because of your poverty, you are all the more dear to me. This is why I have come here today." Baba's presence and loving touch comforted the woman. He spelled out to her, oh, I've already read that. Returning to the car, Baba noticed a group of children around an ice cream vendor, and Mrs. Ford bought ice cream cones for all. Baba was delighted and stood in the crowd and embraced a few of the children. He took Bill and his little sister Nellie back with him to Company Gardens. In recent months, the Circle editorial committee had been formed to publish Baba's discourses in English. Will and Mary Brackett were devoting a major part of their time to this endeavor. In the afternoon of the 30th, they held a reception for Baba at the committee's offices at 15 Charing Cross. Baba met 50 people during his 2-hour visit. At the reception, a Russian woman asked Baba about her people's suffering. Baba commented, "The Russians have to suffer still more. They will eventually find relief and happiness." The woman was so relieved to hear this, tears formed in her eyes, and she sat quietly for a few minutes with her hand in Baba's. During this period, Margaret and Quentin had been commissioned to choreograph vignettes of English history for the ballet, and the program, Pageant of Parliament, was currently being performed at the Royal Albert Hall. They invited Baba to see what they had done, and he agreed to go one night. Watching the performance, Baba remarked that he wanted to shake hands with the Irish lead dancer, Deirdre Fahey, but he stipulated, "She mustn't know who I am." This was not easy, as all the people Margaret and Quentin worked with knew of Baba. How could they introduce him, yet not have her recognize him? The current newspapers had been full of accounts of his visit. When the show was over, they took Baba to the basement, to the dressing rooms. They called Deirdre, and Margaret rather sternly said, "Deirdre, you know Mr. Todd and I can never give you Another job again. You've done so badly on stage tonight. Your performance was terrible, abominable. The girl immediately broke down in tears, and Margaret quickly added, "Oh, by the way, we want you to meet a friend of ours, Mr. Irani." Deirdre was so upset. She shook hands while weeping, not really looking at Baba. Baba stepped away. Quentin then consoled the girl. "Oh, all right. If you work hard, you can keep the job." Years later, Margaret told her about the ruse. On 2nd July, Delia's sister, Minta, drove Baba to the idyllic Star and Garter Hotel in Richmond, overlooking the Thames, for tea with her mother, May, her grandmother, and her mother's companion in their apartment at the hotel. And there's a footnote that Marvin normally reads, if he's still there, or somebody needs to read.
Yeah. So the footnote says the Star and Garter Hotel was later renamed the Petersham Hotel. End of footnote.
Right. All three ancient ones doted on the ancient one as though he were a favorite nephew. Baba was so busy in London that he had no free time to relax. But even in the midst of intense activity, he did not forget these three kind elderly ladies. As age noted, the oceanic one is always in search of drops and enthralls and attracts them to enable them to seek to merge in the ocean's waves. After a stroll through Richmond Park, Baba, Kitty, Delia, the Manjali, and a few others boarded a red double-decker bus and sat on top of it for the ride back to Kitty's house. The next day, Baba went to Will and Mary's cottage in Halstead at 2 p.m. Among those he met again was Winifred Forster. On the 4th, Baba had lunch at Krishna Beer's restaurant. After Baba and the Manjali left London on Thursday, 5th July, 1934, and were driven to Dover by Mrs. Ford, along with Dick Capel Smith's father. Baba wanted and needed rest, but the women pestered him with questions throughout the 2-hour ride. Narina, Kitty, Minta, Delia, and Quentin arrived in Dover by train, and Baba and the Manjali boarded the ferry with them to cross the English Channel. Arriving in Ostend at 4 p.m, they had a pleasant stroll around the town before boarding the Brussels Express for Zurich at 6:30 p.m. Baba had often traveled lower class, but this time he found the wooden benches of 3rd class to be uncomfortable, and it was evident that he was not able to rest properly throughout the night.
All right, maybe time for another reader.
I can read, but is there any way of making the print a little larger?
You could try pinching it out with your own hands.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Yeah, thank you. Okay. So Baba and his companions arrived in Basel, Switzerland on the 6th at 5:30 in the morning, where they had to change trains. They got off and Baba went to have a bath and shave in the station's restroom, since he would have no time once he reached Zurich, where he would be preoccupied meeting people. Baba had a brisk stroll on the platform, and then, boarding another train at 7:30 a.m., they arrived 2 hours later in Zurich, where they were met by Walter Mertens. Walter drove Baba, Kaka, and Adi Jr. in his car, and the others followed in 2 other cars and a bus for the luggage. The parties disembarked 7 miles out of the city at Walter's large 15-room house, Bunneshof at Bunneshoffstrasse 35 in Feldmelin near the lake. where Baba and the Mandali had stayed 2 years before. Walter's wife, Hetty, was joyously waiting to receive Baba at the house.
That was Bundesstraße Strasse. Strasse means street.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I'll try it again. Bunish,
Bundeschofer Strasse.
okay,
Bundeschofer, I think it's Bundeschofer Strasse.
Bundeschofer Strasser.
And it comes from
Yeah.
Bundeschof, whatever that means. So,
Okay, thank you. Baba was given an open, airy room in the left wing with a wonderful view. Chanji and Adi Jr. were in an adjoining room, and Todd in a room next to theirs. Baba went into the garden where he met his lovers, and Walter took some photographs. Anita De Caro, who was living in Zurich, was there. Rano, Nani, Ruano had been instructed to come from Paris. Margaret and Mabel from London, and Enid Corfey on the 8th from Italy. They stayed at the nearby Hotel Robin, since there was no room for them in the Mertens' home. On Saturday morning, 7 July, Baba went with the group to a nearby swimming area by the lake, where he watched them swim. Before coming to Switzerland, Baba had asked the Mertens to find a quiet, yet free and lofty place where he could spend a day in seclusion. Their friend, Meinrad England, a novelist and hunter from the town of Schweiz, showed them a spot which they thought suitable. That afternoon, Baba went by car with England and the Mertens family to inspect it. After driving up a narrow mountain road interspersed with cow gates that had to be opened and closed to pass, they arrived atop a mountain. Baba was led to the edge of a cliff to a viewpoint known as Falling Rock. It overlooked the town of Schweiz near a great lake, a beautiful vista of the Alps, farmland and cow herds in a valley in the heart of Switzerland. The area was well protected by a wild virgin forest, and Baba could be assured of remaining absolutely undisturbed. Baba approved of the spot, and they returned to Zurich at 7 that evening. While Baba was away inspecting the Fallen Fu area, Elizabeth had arrived. She had stayed behind in London and was glad to see Baba after the stress she had gone through to manage the affairs of the film on his behalf during the last many months. Baba too was pleased to see her and greatly appreciated her efforts. Together, they discussed specific matters for a long time, dealing with the finances of the film. The discussion went on late until 10:30 that night, and at one point, Baba remarked, "I am completely fed up with the question and talk of money. I have decided that henceforth, I will not accept gifts from outsiders. This creates grave misunderstandings, and I intend to pay back every penny to everyone." Baba mentioned Herbert Davy and his misunderstanding in this regard, but commented that Herbert was a dear boy and would come back to Baba. Some months before, Norina had contacted the producer, Gabriel Pascal, in Paris to discuss Baba's film project, but disputes had arisen between them. When Pascal heard that Baba was to visit Paris, he was determined to speak in no uncertain terms with him. He blamed Baba for the constant misunderstandings, since Norina would cable Baba frequently about the financial backing and the details of the scenario and script. Pascal had missed seeing Baba in Paris, so he came to Zurich along with Rosamund Wise, a painter friend of Anita's. Pascal and Karl Vollmoeller were scheduled to meet Baba on the evening of Sunday, 8 July 1934. But that morning, Baba stirred things up by telling Norina and Elizabeth that he wanted to meet with Pascal and Karl immediately. Vollmoeller was unable to leave the hotel soon, but Pascal agreed to come. Baba was not pleased about Vollmoeller's attitude. Karl may be a genius, he commented, but he should not think, nor be given to understand, that the picture cannot be made without him. He is being paid for his service and should understand that things must be done according to my terms and conditions. If they, Pascal and Vollmoeller, are not prepared to act accordingly, according to my terms, it is better to drop the whole idea. Pascal was a temperamental man and had reached the boiling point, feeling that Baba wasted his time with the project. Baba was not even in the house when Pascal arrived, and this upset him even more. A phone message then came instructing Elizabeth to give Pascal a choice peach to eat and to tell him that Baba would be coming soon. This seemingly innocuous gesture had a profound effect upon the man, who later confided that his mother used to save him the best peaches, his favorite fruit. After some while, Baba arrived and called for Pascal. As he entered Baba's room for his interview, Baba gently smiled, and Pascal's anger melted away. He could only meekly ask Baba, "What do you wish me to do?" Baba had him sit near him, touched his hand, and inquired about his work. Now in a peaceful mood, Pascal told Baba how he had wanted to bring out the expressions of inner feelings and the deepest being of man by portraying the spiritual side of life in a way that had never been done before. Baba remarked, "I saw one of your films in London once and noticed how subtly you combined humor and pathos. I fully enjoyed it and have often indicated that you are the man to produce my film." And footnote.
The film referred to is most likely the German film, The Captain from Kopfnick, 1931, which Gabriel Pascal produced. Pascal was closely associated with the playwright George Bernard Shaw and later filmed several of Shaw's plays, including Pygmalion and Major Barbara. About him, Shaw said, Pascal is doing for the films what Diaghilev did for the Russian ballet. The man is a genius. End of footnote.
Thank you. You have very deep past connections with me and will work for me in the future, particularly through motion pictures. That is why I myself have drawn you to me. Baba then spelled on the board, "You are my phoenix." After being with Baba for several hours, Gabriel Pascal left feeling happier than he had ever been in his life. It was all wonderful, wonderful, too wonderful for words, he recalled later. I had come like a lion, but returned like a lamb. Discussions about the film project with Pascal and Vollmuller went on continuously for the next 3 days. Vollmuller had written a rough draft of a story, Perfection, about passengers in an airplane and the pilot who represented the master. Pascal suggested that Baba's hand be photographed and shown in the film, and Baba agreed to this. Certain interested Swiss individuals were invited for interviews or to ask questions before Baba. On the 9th, during his interview, Walter's brother Oscar asked, "What hinders me from being a better and truer Christian, and so also a better husband and father?" Baba answered, "You must try as far as possible to live the life that Christ lived, not by theory and intellectual understanding alone should one try to follow Christianity, but it is the feeling, love, that has to be lived." "How can I do that?" Oscar Mertens asked. "To develop love, you have to do it practically. That is, you have to experience it in everyday life. You must lessen your desires and make others happy by thinking less of your own happiness. This can be done. By desire, I mean selfish desires. It is all very practical and very simple, but people always make it complicated." Baba added, "There is no necessity in believing in and following me. Follow the teachings of Christ in its true spirit. By loving Christ and living the life he wanted you to live, you are following me and will come closer to me." Professor Fritz Enderlin, the rector of a women's college in Zurich, asked, "Is Sri Meher Baba ready to give his love to those who, on the basis of the New Testament conception, think him to be wrong in regard to his Christ consciousness, but who are open to the influence of his love?" Baba replied, "If you love Jesus, and if you can follow Christ's teachings and live his life, that is more than enough. You do not need to follow me, for by following Jesus with all love, you will indirectly be following me. That is what I know." Dr. Brunner, a professor of theology at Zurich University, asked, "Does Baba believe that the way to God is possible only through him? From where does Baba take the aspiration of his Christ consciousness?" Baba answered, if you try to find God in your own self, where is the necessity to find it in a special manifestation? Because it is difficult to realize God, it is necessary to have the help of one who has realized God. Walter's first wife came to see Baba on the 10 July, as did Heidi's sister and her family. Evarist Mertens, Walter's son by his first marriage, met Baba on the 11th.
Okay, thank you, Eva.
Thank you.
I'll pick it up from here.
By the way, Heidi Merton's children are in that book, Love Personified, that's in the Lagoon Cabin. I mean, she has some two beautiful children. I think it was her children. Anyway.
Let's keep the comments to a minimum as we're being recorded. Evarist asked Baba, how can I find happiness? In reply, Baba explained, everyone in the world, consciously or unconsciously, seeks happiness in one form or another. Even a murderer seeks happiness, which he hopes to find in murder. And this is why he commits murder. Why and when does a man murder? Either through hatred or jealousy, and because he thinks he will find happiness if he commits murder and takes revenge. Why does a man commit suicide? Because he expects to find happiness in death. Why does another man drink? It is because of the happiness he expects to derive. But what happiness is derived, and how long does it last? So long as the effect of intoxication lasts, no sooner does it cool down than he feels broken, dejected, and miserable. It is the same with lust. A person does it all for the happiness he or she derives, but it is only for the time being that one derives happiness. And when it is over, the person is miserable again. Real happiness is different. It never changes, nor ceases. It is permanent, everlasting, and it lies there within you. It is sleeping, latent, and might be opened, unlocked. Once it is opened, one is always happy. I am the source of all happiness, the sun of bliss. But there is a cover, a curtain that veils you from the sun. The sun is there, shining, spreading its luster all over the world, but you do not allow its rays to approach you. You obstruct them with a veil. Remove that, and you will see the sun. I will help you to open the curtain and enable you to feel happiness within. I love you. I love all. The young man then asked, who do you love more, my mother or Hetty? Reassuring Evarist, Baba replied, I love both. I love all. I have no hatred. Even if you hit me, slap me, or spit on me, I would still love you. Your mother is good. Hetty is good too. Walter is best. I love all. I know you think that Hetty deprived your mother of happiness. It is not so. It is not her fault. It is nobody's fault. You must love Hetty equally as you love your mother. You must also love your mother, not taunt her, prick her. She suffers much. Just do this for me. Love your mother, love Hetty, love all. Be big-hearted, generous, forgiving, and you will find happiness soon. I will help you. Will I pass my examination? Evariste asked. I am afraid not. Then I won't appear for it. No, you must go, Baba told him. What's wrong even if you fail? Suppose you pass. What happens? You find happiness for the time being. Then again, the question of what happens next. You are unhappy, so why worry? I will see to it that you pass. I will turn the key, but promise me one thing. Before going to bed every night, just think of me, then go to bed. Later that afternoon, Baba was driven with all in his group to Otto Hayes Fashion and Costume Design School, where Baba had previously given darshans. On this occasion, Otto and Frida Billow met Baba there, as did other Swiss lovers. At Feldmeilen, Baba was relaxed and paid much attention to the Mertens family, playing with Walter and Hetty's 4 children, Anna Katharina, Wolfgang, Peter, and Toby, all of whom were enchanted by Baba's personality. Arend Furman, their adopted son, also had Baba's close contact during this period. Baba would go for daily walks with his close ones, but they were usually left behind since his pace was always so fast. On one occasion, Rano had the urge to catch up to Baba as he scaled a hill. Baba turned and held his hand out to Rano. When she reached him, suddenly she felt weightless, as if floating, and together they went hand in hand up the hill. That beautiful experience, ascending alone with Baba, sealed her fate, and she bowed at the beloved's feet forever. Rana remembered, it was there that I really began to realize that I was in contact with the avatar. A slow process of breaking up started to take place in my being. I would wait for everybody to go to sleep and then sit outside at night alone, looking at the lake in the beautiful moonlight. I was churned inside out, upside down. I would think, what's happening to me? This is terrible. I can't eat. I can't sleep. Now I understood what Ruano meant when she said she wept for 10 days after meeting Baba. Baba had often emphasized to the Americans and Europeans, I want only love from my Western lovers. The Eastern lovers revere me, bow down to me, and worship me, but I want only love from you. A professor and his wife from Germany were among the group for a few days, but the wife was not really interested in Baba, and so she was not called for an interview. Walter Mertens requested that Baba distribute a small cup of his homemade wine to each, and Baba agreed to do so one evening. Baba instructed Quentin categorically to inform the wife that she was not to join the group. Quentin, being a very sensitive individual, according to Margaret, could not bring himself to face the woman with this order from Baba. Instead, he asked Enid to do so for him. Enid did not realize that it was Baba's order that the woman not be present. All gathered in a room, and Baba began dispensing the sacred wine. Unveiling a glimpse of his beauty, Baba's face glowed like the sun, and his golden brown hair was irresistibly charming. The Divine One's smile enveloped the room and spread its message of joy as he kissed each lover's soul. The beloved's splendor cast a spell over his lovers, and his song echoed in their hearts. While the group was enraptured in a timeless moment, suddenly the door opened and in walked this woman. Baba gave Quentin a deeply reproachful look, but allowed the woman to come in and be seated. Quentin was so remorseful that despite Baba's forgiveness and offer of wine, he refused the glass 3 times. All were told to leave, and Baba had a private talk with Quentin. When you cannot follow such a simple order, Baba scolded him, what will you be able to do for me later? Quentin tried to apologize and explain, but Baba said, remember, my wish is supreme. It is not love if one fails to carry out my dictates. Baba left Feldmelin on Thursday, 12 July, 1934, at 6 in the morning, and was driven to Fallon with Adi Jr., Kaka, Chanji, Quentin, Walter, and Hetty, 7 people in a 5-seater Buick with luggage, tents, and other provisions piled high on top, at the back, and in the trunk. Hetty drove since Walter had injured his hand. The weather was splendid and the scenery was beautiful. Hetty recalled an interesting experience while driving. Excuse me. We drove, oops. We drove along the lake of Zurich for about half an hour, all still quiet, almost no people on the road, passing village after village. Baba wanted me to drive quicker, and so I did. Before starting, I had adjusted my rearview mirror so that I could see Baba's face. He was seated in the back between two of his mandali, his head deeply wrapped up in a big shawl, his face hidden in shadow. For a long moment, I could not look away. Although I kept the wheel well in my hands, I felt as if my own action was slipping off, as if we were driving on a cushion, the wheels scarcely touching the ground. I was keeping my eyes always fixed on Baba in the mirror. I then saw his face getting brighter, and at the same time, I was strongly drawn to the wheel. Again, I saw Baba's face more clearly radiant. Then I felt as if I were discharged from a circle and I was driving easily once more. They crossed the Lake of Zurich at Rapperswil and then drove over the Sattel Pass, arriving in Schweiz after 2 hours. Meinrad England joined them there to lead the way to Fallenflue. He had to stand on the back luggage rack as they slowly drove up the mountain, as there was no room in the car. As mentioned, the winding, stony road was narrow and rough, partitioned with frequent wooden gates for the purpose of keeping the cows in the pastures. They had to keep stopping to open and shut these gates as they ascended. Finally, they reached the Forest Road junction, where Baba and the men got out of the car. The men loaded the luggage upon their shoulders, and England guided them to a place not far from the mountain edge chosen by Baba for his seclusion. Here, Baba, Adi Jr., Kaka, Chanji, Quentin, and Walter had breakfast. Baba distributed tea, bread, butter, and fruit. Meanwhile, England had walked back to the junction, and he drove back to Schweiz, where Hetty was to wait at his house and return to the junction at 7 o'clock that evening to pick them up. After eating, Baba gave instructions to the 4 men concerning his seclusion. It may be an hour later or earlier than 7 o'clock. It all depends on when the work is finished. Your duty is to stay here on watch for 2 hours each. Kaka should come with me and stay 100 yards away. All of you should fast and not even drink water during the period of my seclusion. You can rest if you like after your turn is over and talk, but not loudly. The watch was divided between the men. Quentin was to keep watch from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m., Walter from 11:30 to 1:30 p.m., Adi Jr. from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m., and Chanji 3:30 to the end. Baba had also explained to them the importance of keeping people away from his seclusion spot. While working, I leave my physical body, which has become dead to all feelings of touch. I would not even feel it if my body were hammered or cut to pieces. It is best if I draw a boundary all around at a distance of 50 yards. No one should come closer. Anyone trying to cross that boundary line would drop dead. That is why I have Kaka keep watch from a distance of 100 yards. Putting on his hat, Baba then walked away, his overcoat slung over his shoulders and carrying some things. Kaka followed with Baba's bedding. When Baba reached the ridge of the steep mountain, Kaka spread the bedding and prepared the spot as Baba wished. Baba wore just a shirt and sadra when at 9:30 the seclusion work began. Baba lay on his mattress, held a mosquito net on his chest, and covered himself with 2 sheets. He stayed that way for 3 hours, occasionally turning from one side to the other. At one point during Baba's seclusion, a few poor Swiss farm women tried to enter the forest to gather firewood. Walter explained to them that dangerous electrical experiments were being conducted that day, and people were forbidden from entering the area. As per Baba's previous instructions, Walter compensated them for being sent away. At 12:30 p.m., Baba sat up, removed the covering from his face, and clapped for Kaka. He instructed Kaka to sit closer at a spot 50 yards away. He then covered himself again with the net and sheets and lay back down. During the seclusion work, Baba would sit up and lie back down every hour. After some time passed, Kaka felt a bit drowsy, but just as he was about to doze off, he heard a man's voice whispering to him. When he opened his eyes, there was no one. After midday, ominous black clouds gathered. Eddie was warned by England to close the roof of the car. While outside, when she looked up at Fallon Flew, she saw it shrouded in black clouds, heavy rain pouring down, with only Baba's seclusion spot rayed in bright light. Do we want to go on one more page? Maybe it is 12 noon now.
Yes, 'cause it's,
Yeah, I think we should finish this part of
yeah,
the story. definitely.
please.
Yeah, I'll finish the story. That'd be great.
Yes, okay. And when the terrific thunderstorm broke out, the men built a shelter to protect themselves, but nevertheless, they got completely drenched by the heavy rain. When the rain stopped, they lit a fire to dry themselves, and also for Baba when he would return. Maya's usual opposition, Baba was to remark later. Earlier than expected, at 4:30 p.m., Baba rose from his bedding, put on his coat and pants, and walked back to the men. To their amazement, he was completely dry. When asked about it, Baba simply smiled a significant smile, which the men intuitively understood. Baba was radiant, beaming. He later commented, "I am very happy. I am satisfied with the work done here. It was better than at Assisi. When I work like this, a meeting of large numbers of my agents is held, but you cannot see them with your gross eyes. Sometimes, though, you can hear a rumble like boot steps." At 5:15 p.m., Baba distributed fruit to break their fast. Then they walked through the forest and fields to the road junction, arriving in 45 minutes. 5 minutes later, Hetty showed up in the car. She had felt an inner urge to arrive an hour earlier than ordered. They loaded the luggage, and at Baba's request, they began their return home by a different route. At the top of Ibergureg Pass, they stopped to have coffee in the local restaurant. Inside, a happy atmosphere prevailed, with local Swiss farmers laughing and singing in loud, merry voices. Some danced, and Baba particularly enjoyed their yodeling. It was quite a contrast to the hours of seclusion he had spent on Fallon Flew, an enjoyable respite from his strenuous work.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. They started back to Zurich at 7:15 p.m. and reached the Mertens residence 2 hours later. Anita remarked that Baba looked glorious. "Baba, what authority you have," she said. Baba responded, "Yes, but real authority means having great responsibilities." Baba was in a good mood and called his lovers to his room. He told them his work had been accomplished well and explained about his meeting with the advanced souls of the hierarchy, the future war, and its protection of Switzerland. He spelled out on his board, "I have drawn a circle around the country so that it will not be involved in the coming war." He went on to describe the details of a seclusion on the mountaintop. And a footnote says,
Baba revealed that one of the spirits whom he contacted during the seclusion at Falun Flu was extremely tall and bony. Some of the Swiss group were convinced Baba was referring to Nicholas von Flue, 1417 to 1487, the Swiss spiritual figure known popularly as Bruder class. And in brackets is brother class. End of footnote.
which of course is Santa Claus.
The next day, 13 July 1934, was filled with private interviews from 9 in the morning until 6. Until 6, where am I? In the
At the
evening,
top.
that evening. Baba met with more than 50 Swiss and Europeans. Norina and Walter interpreted for those who did not speak English. Excerpts from a few of those meetings are given below. You know what? I think this is a good spot to stop. What page is this, please?
1631.
1631. Okay, I'm going to mark it down for a change. Okay, why don't we stop the reading here? Somebody hit stop record.